Hello once again, witchy people. This is a VR to Dru, she who walks between the worlds, and it's a response to her video Halloween versus Samhain. Now, I always thought that I celebrated them together, but after watching her video it kind of made me think that perhaps I don't. I do part them. You have to go and watch her video. It's incredibly informative. She says that she just goes into a small part of the history of Samhain, but she really does cover a lot of bases and explains a lot. So Samhain, the word Samhain, comes from ancient Gaelic, ancient Celtic and ancient Manx language, and in all three languages it means November. Ancient Gaelic also means end of summer. And it was a time when obviously you reaped the last harvest and you started slaughtering animals ready for the winter. And especially to the ancient Celts, it was a very, very important time, because it was a time of ancestor worship. It was a fire festival when family would gather around the hearth and remember their ancestors and leave offerings for their ancestors, leave a place for them at the table and such like. So it was an important part, if not the most important part of the Celtic year. But Dru goes into all of that, so I don't need to. So I have always thought, I never really celebrated Samhain as such. I just always used to call it Halloween or All Hallows Eve, and I just celebrated it. I used to bake things, and not so much myself go out at Halloween when I was a child. That wasn't allowed. You've got to bear in mind, when I was a very young child, there was, Roger Black, the Moors murders, all sorts. It wasn't a safe place necessarily to go wandering out as children. So, and when I was about 5 or 6, me and 2 friends were nearly abducted from walking home from school. So it wasn't exactly okay for children to go out Halloweening, if you like. But my children did, and then I didn't like the idea. So we celebrated by having a huge party in the house and inviting all their friends and wrecking my carpet, gouging the walls, green marshmallow fluff all in the carpet forever and smudged into the curtains. And have a huge sleepover, lots of music, lots of festivities, and when the children were all tucked up in bed, we'd all sit, all us mothers would sit down and have a glass of wine and a good old natter. So in that way, I suppose I do separate it and celebrate them differently. I don't often have a bonfire. Of course we do have Guy Fawkes Night here, that's November the 5th. But also, I've always kind of celebrated it over the course of days. And strangely enough, October the 31st for me is when the Yuletide decorations, Christmas decorations, come out of the loft, and November the 1st is when I put them up. I invite the winter in, and the soul of winter, if you like. I always put my tree usually goes up on November the 1st. I don't have a lot of decorations in the house, I just have a tree. But that is once again celebrating Christmas and Yule, which is something else that Dru spoke about, and I do. They are two completely different celebrations for me. I celebrate Christmas because we always did as a child. As a child, we celebrated Christmas. It was very much a family thing. It wasn't very often, if ever, a religious festival for us. Occasionally we would go to church on Christmas Eve. We went to Winchester Cathedral once, which is obviously a Catholic, I do believe, Catholic church, cathedral. But yeah, we were at Winchester Cathedral when I was very young once, and I must have been about 5 once again. And my grandparents, my dad's parents, were sat a couple of rows behind us in the cathedral. So me and my brother thought it'd be absolutely fantastic to dive underneath the pews and go all underneath the pews and knock people's legs out of the way and pop up and say hello to our grandparents and go back and forth between our parents and our grandparents. And the mass that was being said and the carols, it was all in Latin. And the priest, whatever they call a Catholic minister, was saying something in Latin, and my mum grabbed hold of me and said, "That's the priest telling you off because you're being very, very naughty." And yes, we were told that an usher sort of came along and said, "Please, you have to control your children. Stop annoying people. This is a very solemn occasion." Just something that came to mind just then, these memories being told off in Winchester Cathedral. So even that wasn't so much a religious affair, it was more of a family gathering, a celebration of family. And I think as a family we've always celebrated in that way. Even, I mean, it is quite difficult to try and separate, I think, the pagan and Christian festivals, because they have become so enmeshed with each other. Not just Halloween and Samhain and Yule and Christmas, although they are different days. Ostara, Easter, Candlemas is another one that's a Christian festival, Lammas. But I've never, even as children, when we celebrated Easter and we had chocolate Easter eggs and made fluffy chicks, a lot of it, I can remember my grandparents, once again my dad's parents, we celebrated by making Easter bonnets, and they had to be straw, decorating Easter bonnets, which is a very, once again, pagan thing. So, and obviously the history of Halloween is, I find it quite strange, because most pagan and Christian celebrations, when the Christians decided to sort of amalgamate these celebrations to encourage people to worship together, if you like, and encourage them to believe in Christianity, Christians had a reason for the celebration. So Easter, there was the resurrection of Christ. Christmas, you got the birth of Christ. But Halloween, there was no Christian festival, if you like, no Christian reason to celebrate Halloween, which is maybe why so many Christians don't like celebrating Halloween. I think was it Pope Gregory the something or other did the whole thing about, dressing up as saints and everything, and then someone else said, no, it's wrong, you can't do that, and you mustn't celebrate Devil's Night. But for us, it definitely, as a family, it was never in any way religious in a Christian way. It was very much a family gathering, and quite often, we'd set off fireworks if it was, and sort of amalgamate firework night and Halloween if they were close enough, and because obviously firework night, it was easier to do it a weekend if it landed on a weekend. But so I find it quite interesting that Halloween, to me, has very, very little to do with Christianity. It has no true Christian roots. I found in my view, and I am probably wrong, but just the way I see it, it is a purely pagan festival. And it's not something that has that Christian roots, something to do with Christ in it. So there's that. Now, how I celebrate Halloween or Samhain, and like I said, I always figured that I kind of celebrated them together, but I've realised that I don't. I do have very separate things, and even though none of them are celebrated as a religious festival, they are both celebrated somewhat separately in my home. Halloween was always for the children. It was very much, let's watch a spooky film and tell ghost stories around candlelit tables, and occasionally be allowed to go out trick-or-treating, having a party. And then when the children's party was over, and then when all the parents had gone home and quite often left their kids there to sleep the night, had their glass of wine, everything else I did was for a more personal reason, and that is where it becomes the separation between Halloween and Samhain. Halloween for me is a celebration of community. It is something that most people join in on. Samhain becomes very much more personal and secular. It's something that I do for myself. So if I do baking, that becomes something personal to me. Divination, any divination I do is purely, and I think at Halloween it does take on a different feel, definitely, than most of the rest of the year. Maybe because of the onus that's put on it, because of the whole veil between the worlds and everything, but that happens at other times of year as well. But definitely the difference between Samhain and Halloween was a personal thing. It was celebrating with community, celebrating with friends and family, and then celebrating for Samhain on my own or with very, very close family. And divination especially. Divination is something that I tend to do. It's a very lone practice for me. It probably is for a lot of people, but it definitely is a very lone practice. So it became very personalised. I have some clothes that I like to wear on Halloween. I have some jewellery that I like to wear on Halloween or Samhain. But when I say Halloween or Samhain, I am intermeshing them. I am intermingling them. They are interchangeable. And one means very much the same to the other to me. They are basically the same to me, because I've never had that religious Christian aspect to them, to Halloween. But yeah, please do watch Dru's video. It's enlightening in a lot of ways, and it will probably make you think very much about your own practice. And do you actually celebrate these things separately? Do you separate them in your practice? Because you do celebrate them in different ways, and you just never realised it before, which is what's just happened to me listening to Dru's video. So I'm watching Dru's video, so thank you, Dru. You've kind of opened me up a bit here and made me rethink part of my path that I've always just, I think maybe sometimes, me certainly, I don't know if other people do, I sometimes fall into a bit of a rut, and you do the same things at certain times of year. Like I said, November the 1st, my tree goes up. You can call it a Christmas tree, a Yule tree. We call it Christmas because it's easier. It's more acceptable for a lot of people. When the children were young, it was very much, don't say Yule, because people don't tend to understand so much. But with Christmas and Yule, it is very much, although I don't celebrate Christmas as a Christian celebration, I do celebrate Christmas Day. But I also celebrate, because Yule is a different day, where I think Halloween and Samhain are the same day, they come to mean the same thing for a lot of people. So, and over the years, I think Dru explains it with the ancient Celts, the ancient Gauls, Gaelic communities, ancient Irish, Romans, and Christianity. It kind of enmeshed into one big celebration that took a little bit of everything from everyone. I probably celebrate more in a Celtic way, but not necessarily. Obviously, I don't, like I said, I don't have a bonfire. I used to have an open fire. I don't now. I rely totally on incense burners and candlelight for a lot of things. I don't like having fires in the garden. I don't like having fires at all, really. So it's very much, it's not celebrated in a Christian way, but it is celebrated at the same time Christians celebrate. But I do find Halloween quite, like I said, it's not, to me, it's never been a Christian festival. It hasn't got Christian roots, unlike things like Easter and Christmas, which is why I think people say it's easy to celebrate Christmas because it's a different day. So, but and that makes it harder to separate Halloween from Samhain. But yes, I do believe I celebrate them differently. Neither one is celebrated in a Christian way. As I say, Halloween to me is a community gathering. It's a community festival, wider than family. And Samhain is much more personal, sometimes to the point of being a solitary celebration rather than with many people. There you go, I've waffled, and sorry for the interruption earlier. That was my son giving me a phone call. So there you go. Samhain, Halloween, are they the same? Are they different? For me, they are the same, and always have been the same to a certain extent. And like I said, listening to Dru's video, it's kind of made me realise that there is a certain separation there, that I do celebrate them differently and I do see them differently, even though they mean the same thing to me, and I don't, or nor have I ever celebrated Halloween as a Christian festival. There you go. Shutting up, honestly now. Thank you for watching, witchy people. I'll be back very, very soon. Bye for now.